Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to Breckland Council's Cabinet on Monday the 23rd of September. It's 9:30, so we'll formally start today's meeting. It's great to see so many of you here today. We'll start with item 1, which are the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of July 2024, contained within pages 4 to 19 of colleagues' agenda pack. Are members happy that it's a true and accurate record? Councillor Hewitt.
Sam, I am happy that it's a true and accurate record. Having looked at the video for that, I was actually absent from that meeting in the US. But I would like to clarify, if it is in your purview for me to do so, just a reference from a question and an observation that was asked of me in my absence. And the expression that was used at the time was that I had made an attempt to shut down any arguments relating the planned disposal of Kittle Close car park on the grounds that it could be developed. For the avoidance of any doubt, and for anyone reading these minutes, I just want to confirm that I have never attempted to close down any arguments. In fact, I have welcomed conversations and emails. I've responded to every single email from every single resident who's written to me from Watton and wider afield in car park. Indeed, I have offered to go to Watton to speak to the businesses who asked me to come and speak, although they have now postponed that meeting. But more to the point, the reference that I was making in relation to the comment that was made was a direct reference from the report in paragraph 2.1.5, which talked about the options for Kittle Road car park in Watton. I just want to clarify that in case anyone looking at the minutes suggested otherwise. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Paul. Right to reply noted, and your comments are duly, but for accuracy, I'll take them as accurate, but thank you for that commentary there. So we'll move on to item 2, which are apologies for absence, please, Teresa.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from Councillor Crane.
Lovely, thank you. And in Councillor Crane's absence for item 11, Councillor Sarah Suggett will present in that item. So we'll move on to item 3, any urgent business. I haven't received any. Item 4, any declarations of interest. If there are any declarations which members haven't already made and they're required to do so under that relevant item, please make me aware. Thank you, Councillor Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to item 10, the local plan update, as we're all aware, I am an architect in practice in Breckland. I won't be taking part in that discussion.
Lovely, thank you. Nobody else. Item 10, non-members wishing to address the meeting. As always, you are almost welcome to contribute on any item of Cabinet's business today. Item 6, Chairman's announcements. I don't have any. Let's move to item 7, which is the Breckland Community Funding Application standard item. Councillor Ashby, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm very pleased to announce that Breckland Council has approved 7 grant bids totalling £3,500 to support local organisations in providing essential transport services to vulnerable residents across the district. The grants of £500 each are from the Council's Communities Transport Grant Fund and will ensure that Breckland residents can access vital resources and services, especially those without their own transportation. And the organisations that were awarded funding were Breckland's Children's Clothes Bank, Dereham Cancer Care, Caring Friends Mid Norfolk, A Little More Kindness, the Kindness Cabin, Keystone Development Trust, Dove's Nest Ministries and Swaffham and Litcham Home Hospice. I'm also pleased to announce the successful allocation of £25,648 from round 1 of the match funding. The funding is dedicated to initiatives that aim to address vulnerability, support disadvantaged community members and enhance overall health and wellbeing in Breckland. And the 6 local organisations receiving funding in this round are Caring Friends for Cancer, Home Start Norfolk, Love Dereham Limited, Norwich City Community Sports Foundation, Thetford Vineyard Church and the Wells Spring Family Centre. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members in relation to that? I've got Councillor Hewitt, then Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Sam, thank you. And Tristram, thank you once again just for demonstrating the fact that our remit as a council is, should always be to think wider than just our statutory responsibilities, to make sure that those most vulnerable in our community can and should get access to the help that they so desperately need. And I'm grateful for your continued support and in terms of the management of the grant scheme that you've just currently run through. There's some fantastic organisations doing some fantastic things for the most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to thank the council for finding this money for funding the most vulnerable in our areas. My ward surrounds Swaffham, and as you know, I'm a supporter of the Swaffham and Litcham Home Hospice, so I'm really pleased we're still supporting them. And the Breckland Clothes Bank, which I think was a brilliant initiative by the lady who runs it, helping the most vulnerable young families or supporting young families with clothing and school uniform and the like. And it's been a massive, massive injection of support to younger families. And can I just say, where I've got the mic, Leader, I was looking at probably answering this at item 6. I'd just like to say a big thank you to yourself, our Chief Executive Max, and the officers who put on a very professional and interesting town and parish forums across the district. I know they went down well, and one in my area was attended by Lord and Lady Roberts, and they, I should say not Lord, he's not a Lord, Sir Sam and Lady Roberts came to one, and they thoroughly enjoyed it and found it very professional. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Peter. Councillor Webb, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was delighted to be able to support 2 of the applications to the Community Transport Fund and 4 from the other fund. Thank you very much. It's meant a heck of a lot to these organisations, smaller and larger, and I've been personally to the areas where they are being implemented, and I am amazed about the difference our funding makes for our communities. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Webb. Any other comments in relation to those questions? Super, thank you very much, Councillor Ashby. What's the next round dates? Have you got those to hand to share with Cabinet colleagues? Brilliant, good. We look forward to lots of applications coming in for the second round of applications. Super, okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item then, which is item 8, which is the Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme for the review 25-26. And Councillor Cowan to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a recurring item that we will all be very familiar with. It relates to what our policies as a council are relating to council tax reduction. And you will see from the documentation before you, there's a sort of track change effectively of time as to what we've done over the last few years with our local council tax reduction scheme. So what I would like to do is draw your attention to paragraph 1.11, which looks at the current scheme as has been running for the last 12 months and looks ahead at what we would prefer to do, if anything, any changes. And you can see there that we are proposing to retain our 91.5% maximum reduction for rate of working age customers, but one change in the management of the scheme is listed in paragraph 1.15 below. And when you read that particular paragraph, it becomes quite clear why we're doing so. And if there are any detailed questions, I'm sure colleagues from ARP will be able to bring those to your notice. But basically, it's all about the change in working arrangements and with DWP and benefits, and how we can try and ensure that the DWP passported scheme actually ties in with and is consistent with what we're identifying in terms of fraud. Members will recall that ARP and their fraud investigations have raised significant sums of money, particularly through single council tax reduction. And it is surprising that despite a lot of advertising, despite a lot of success, many prosecutions, that people still think they can actually claim stuff for which they are not entitled. And as a result of that, what we're trying to do here is make sure that if people are claiming they're entitled to a reduction in the council tax, that if there's any crossover between any fraud investigations, that we tie those up particularly well to ensure that we do not release funds for people for whom there is no entitlement. Beyond that, that's where we are at the moment. The option is quite clear. We either approve or do not approve the recommendations. And Chairman, if you wish, I'll read those recommendations out now. So the first one is that Cabinet considers and approves the annual review of the local council tax reduction scheme for the year 25-26 with no changes to the contribution level. And that further, item 2, Cabinet considers and approves the following amendment to the local council tax reduction scheme. And that is that the DWP passported benefit status for LCTRS assessments will be disregarded where the local authority is satisfied that the LCTRS assessment is incorrect because of information obtained by the local authority fraud investigation team. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thanks Phil. Ali or Lorraine, anything to add at all? No, super, thank you very much. Questions, comments from colleagues? I've got Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Cowan. I've heard in the past that scrutiny, the excellent contributions, presentation from ARP colleagues, very clear in terms of how the scheme works, how it's constructed, and how we make sure it's not abused. As you will know, at full council in the past, some colleagues have suggested that the 91.5% be increased. Obviously, I'm pleased that all veterans are protected at 100%. Perhaps Councillor Cowan or colleagues can advise if you've done an assessment on the impact to the council or the number of residents if that rate of 91.5% was to be increased, you know, potentially up to 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and you're quite right. And when you look at paragraph 1.12, it does identify that the war pensioners are entitled to a bigger benefit than that. But I can assure you that ARP have been undertaking on a regular basis reviews of where we are with our reduction scheme. I think if you wish a detailed answer, that can be given, and I don't know if ARP representatives are able to do that for you today. If not, we can certainly give you a written response. Lorraine, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Yes, we do. As part of this review annually, we do some modelling. So we look at different percentages. We start off with the 91.5. We consider the cost implications if we increase that to 100%, but also 95% and also lower percentages as well. So that is all presented with the costs that would be associated with that change, that how it would impact Breckland and County Council, Norfolk Police and Crime Commission, etc.
Thanks. Anything you wish to follow up on that, Councillor Clark? No. Any other questions at all in relation to the LCTRS? No. So we've got those recommendations, 2 of for Cabinet. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That is carried. So move on to item 8 then, which is the Breckland Housing Strategy 2024 to 2028. Councillor Sarah Suggett to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'm very pleased to present to Cabinet today our new housing strategy. To appreciate the significance of the strategy, I think it's important to understand the context. We are hearing more and more about the scale and extent that we are facing as a country regarding housing and its challenges. Temporary accommodation is a demand-led service, and across the country that demand is at an unprecedented level and very difficult to manage and budget. It was recently announced that local authorities across the country have spent a record £1 billion on temporary accommodation last year. We in Breckland are not immune to this crisis, and neither are our residents. And it's important to recognise that this is financially unsustainable. However, the finances are only one side of the story. We refer to data, statistics, policies and strategies, but we must not lose sight that what we are really talking about are people, families, and having somewhere to call home. Daily, our teams are listening to harrowing accounts of domestic abuse, hearing about terrible conditions that families are living in, are going above and beyond to listen to and help men and women who have reached crisis points and are forced to make impossible decisions. It is imperative that we make sure our team have the tools they need to help and support our residents in the best way possible, making positive impacts and changing their lives. Offering this support and guidance, however important, is only part of the solution. Ultimately, we need more homes. The proposed strategy represents an extensive shift in approach to and seriousness of tackling the housing market in Breckland. It deliberately goes significantly beyond the minimum standard required of us and takes a much broader look at the issues surrounding housing in general. You will have noticed the document provides an overview of the housing challenges prevalent throughout the district. It links them to the broader national housing crisis and sets out the steps Breckland will take to address these locally. Clearly, there are some well-established and complex challenges that we collectively face, which this document is simply not going to fix overnight. However, we have not shied away from these challenges. We have instead formed a longer-term blueprint for change that we aim to embed within the way we work in the future and achieve change as part of an holistic and systematic approach. There are some areas of work that we carry out that this strategy can help us to bolster that work and to keep us on track. For example, our private sector housing team works to ensure that housing standards across the private rented sector are acceptable. This involves working with tenants and landlords to ensure standards are maintained. The quality of housing across Breckland is generally high, and we work positively with most landlords across the district to support this. However, there are occasions when unfortunately this is not the case, and our team work extremely hard to proactively deal with rogue landlords. A really good example of this that I would like to share with you is a recent case which officers found a rented property with blocked fire escapes, damaged fire doors, dangerous electrics and broken and rotten windows. This led to the council issuing a fine to that landlord responsible, sending a clear message that we will not stand by while Breckland residents were put at risk. This property has since been brought up to the required standards, and the money from this and other similar fines is used to support further investigations and in turn help increase the quality of housing in the district. In addition, the council has successfully obtained funding from the previous government to tackle homes with damp and mould issues. This project is about to get underway and will link into the Warm Homes project to help ensure Breckland residents are living in safe and healthy homes. A few weeks ago, we presented the strategy to Overview and Scrutiny, who were very supportive and gave us some constructive feedback that has been reflected in the report shown today. I'd like to thank members of the Commission for their time and interest. Finally, I would like to say that a piece of work like this does not just happen overnight. We began this piece of work with a really successful workshop, bringing together the volunteer sector, landlords, developers, landowners, county colleagues, who all acknowledged the challenge and showed willing and pulling their sleeves up. I would like to thank all who attended and helped us to shape this strategy and committed to working together. I would like to pay a special thanks to Olivia and Abby, who have appreciated how important this topic is and who have both worked immensely hard to pull this together. I would also like to acknowledge the work that both councillors Banbridge and Bowes have played in getting this item to where it is today, and for their direction, input and support. And I would just like to hand over to Abby, who has a few words to say. Thank you.
Hiya. I'm Abby Gresson, and I'm new to Breckland as the Strategic Housing Policy Manager. However, I'm not new to the strategy, having attended one of the workshops in February in my previous role for a local SME developer. That successful workshop and follow-up actions are largely thanks to the incredible work put in by Olivia and my predecessor, Lisa. In truth, attending that workshop lit a spark in me, and I went away just totally engaged, really passionate about the work that had been done and the work that was being done to put this strategy together. And it was something that I couldn't ignore, and when an opportunity came up to join the team, I knew I had to take it. The housing strategy before you has been really carefully put together, and it is ambitious, but I'm excited to be here. I'm really keen to get stuck in and hopefully deliver houses in the right places for the right people. I hope that the strategy is adopted today safe in the knowledge that you have a really passionate team behind it who want to make a difference. And I believe there's no reason why we can't be leaders and innovators in doing this. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? If not, I'll go to Councillor Attewell, then Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. what I'm going to say now probably crosses over a little bit into planning as well, so bear with me. Just a couple of observations I've got reading the document, which I think is a really welcome the document. It's really comprehensive, and I thank you for that. I just want to talk a bit about exception sites, because I'm wondering whether we're missing a trick, and I've been doing some reading up about this, whether in our local plan we should have a presumption in favour of development of exception sites, and we should state that in the local plan. The reason for that would possibly encourage landowners to come forward. And, you know, obviously whenever they do a thing like this, there's cost involved to start with, and I think we need to try and encourage them. I looked at the policy HOU 08 in the draft local plan. I'm not quite sure the wording in there is strong enough, but I think if we had a definite presumption in favour of development for exception sites, that may encourage us to free up more sites to get us the houses we need. The other thing I just want to ask the team here is about the legal definition of identified need, because I think I also read in HOU 8, we've changed our policy slightly to have a more wider local identified need, as opposed to having traditionally it was always the identified need in the parish where the houses were going to happen. I welcome that change. I think that's too narrow perhaps to try and get the number of people in need in a specific parish. But if you've got a nucleus of parishes around it, and you can have a scheme come forward, I'm just wondering how we would do the housing needs surveys in terms of identifying that need. At the moment, a developer has to come forward, do the housing needs survey in the particular parish, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how we're going to change and adapt our approach to a wider local area. And I'm sure he's raring to go and he's going to give me the answer by the looks of it.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Atwell. I'll come to Andrew Darcy first, just around the first policy question for exemption sites and HOU 08, and then we'll come to Mr Scowen to respond to the wider legal definition in terms of the HEDNA and how the council's interpretation of that is.
Thank you. I think it's certainly something we'll take away and look at. I think in general terms, what the local plan is trying to do is to certainly dovetail as best as possible with the housing strategy, and not wishing to assume anything on a later item. There may be now an opportunity to work even closer with our housing colleagues. We do work with them if the local plan is paused. Especially in light of the new housing strategy. We already have a workshop between the two teams lined up for later in October to set that ball rolling, and exception sites clearly is, as well as any other ways that we can support rural growth in villages, etc., will all be on the table. But I think now we have that opportunity to look at observations on HOU 08 and other policies and see where it can take us to dovetail in with this. So certainly wouldn't rule it out. We'll see where it takes us.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to add to that, Roger, it's a really good point that you make there, and it is something that Andy and I have probably discussed at length many times, I would suggest. There is a sort of relatively strict definition of rural exception sites, and we talk about those a lot, and it's right that we talk about those a lot, albeit that's not the only type of site where we see houses developed in the rural area, of course. And we've worked quite hard on the local plan policies to build in as much flexibility as possible. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the only direction we could take, and you know, clearly there could be further work done in that regard. As Andy says, we've set a workshop with planning colleagues for sort of mid-October time to talk about how we implement the priorities and the objectives set out within the housing strategy practically, you know, in determining planning applications and indeed through informing planning policy. So we are trying to create as flexible conditions as possible, while recognising that it is this balance that we strike in terms of making them locally acceptable to the residents of the village, the host village, if you like. So there is a bit of a balance, I might suggest, but I take your point on board. So it's really, I'm with you. It's not right that it takes as long as it does to progress such a site through a planning system. So we do need to think about how we set the right parameters around this and require the right level of evidence. But we've tried to be flexible, around the definition of that local need for that reason.
Councillor Ashford, if you follow up.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the answer. So it sounds to me at the moment like you don't have the finite detail about how you would do how you would prove that there's a local need. The only thing I'm going to say on that, and I think it does need to be changed, but I think we need to be very careful about the parameters set by the NPPF and probably the National Planning Policy guidance as to what the local definition is. And that might be we need a lawyer in the room when you finally do this to make sure that we're actually that can't be challenged. So I think absolutely, we need to change it. That there's too narrow at the moment, and clearly there's a bit more work that needs doing on that. And as a councillor, I'm happy to feed into that as and when that workshop happens in October, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, if you've got local intelligence, Councillor Attwell, where you think that schemes aren't coming forward because we're too constrained at the moment, and the emerging local plan and our Hedner assessment and in turn our housing strategy is once again making that too prescriptive, then absolutely please feed that in so that we can absolutely respond to that to make sure we're building the right homes in the right place at the right quality for the right need. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to echo Councillor Attwell, there's obviously clearly a read across between the housing strategy and the local plan, not just in terms of the acquiring extra units for things like temporary accommodation. There's also read across later on to some of the performance indicators. So it's more of a comment that the housing strategy is clearly going to have to be an organic document that adapts to latest pronouncements by the new government, and the read across down to things like, which I'm concerned about in my own ward, which I'm having support from the housing team around temporary accommodation, HMOs, and so forth. And I just hope that obviously going forward we're going to have further updates around which will look at both the local plan, but also the operational side of the housing, the housing strategy in terms of acquiring those particular units, whether that's coming back to scrutiny. And obviously one can't help but notice the comments made by the many residents, parishioners, parishes and towns that turned up to the very helpful engagement session that you've had recently here, talking about a range of issues and the pressures that the council face and how we deal with that. A lot of these things aren't in isolation. That's really a general observation, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Is there anything particular where you raised at scrutiny around HMOs and our engagement and attitude towards them as a housing authority, or our temporary accommodation, which has been missed here? Or is it just actually your comment that it's a live document and we just need to make sure we're cognizant of that and adapting to that? I just want to make sure Cabinet colleagues are aware if there's anything which you raised and we've missed it.
No, thank you, Chairman. I mean, any issues where there seems to be either further information or action required, I'm actually dealing with the housing team, who are very, very active in this regard. Sometimes by its very nature, temporary or emergency accommodation, it's how I think there needs to be probably a further look at how units are acquired, what inspections are taking place beforehand, or subsequently. And I appreciate, obviously, with the demographics of the residents and we're dealing with, and the circumstances may make not all approaches made to councillors by residents as clear cut as they may sometimes be. So there will be sort of operational issues again, which I was shared in my ward, which myself and Councillor Callaghan. But undoubtedly it's one of those areas which is continuing to cause particular pressures on the team. So there will also be another avenue to explore around, well, we've purchased so many units so far. That's obviously a huge hit on our current, as we know, in our overspend, which is identified in the 409. What are we then going to do about that, if you like, to invest to reduce our costs going forward? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for your comments. I think from the feedback that we got from scrutiny, there was some tweaks to some of the wording, which would help us to, I think it would also help Councillor Attwell's comments around trying to be that bit more flexible. And I think the length of time it takes to do some things isn't always helpful. And I think referring back to your point, Roger, there was a site in one of our mine and fields villages in Hockham where the local need was identified, but it took so long to get developed. COVID didn't help, I must say, with that situation, but it took so long to develop that actually that need then changed by the time those houses. So we did then have to act on our feet, change what those parameters were, so that actually those houses were used and utilised by it. Just we shifted that parameter for local to be the surrounding villages rather than that singular village. So there's already some work there where the teams work together so that they can be adaptable and flexible when required. And the tweaking that was really helpful, which came from scrutiny, will allow us to do that. The fact that this is a live working document, you know, is reflected in the recommendations, where we can adapt this policy in this document as we go. More than happy to bring it back to scrutiny at a point in time. The board, which Stephen was then referring to, is going to allow us to make sure that the delivery mechanism in here is being achieved, and that we're actually starting to see some of those bigger ticket items where we can come together. There are some long burn things in here, but there are some quick wins in here as well. But the demand just hasn't gone away. You know, that we've got around about 1,300 people on the housing register, around about 130 people every night in temporary accommodation, and the biggest challenge is having somewhere for those people to move on to. So hopefully all working together. It's really helpful coming to scrutiny, and I'm happy to come back whenever it's required to do so.
Lovely, thank you. I've got Councillor Hewitt, then Councillor Ashby, then Councillor Bambridge, then Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Sam. This is so a pragmatic but an effective document. I think it's been a big challenge, no easy task to try and get the document to where it is at the moment, particularly as has also been raised with links to planning, which has its own challenges around biodiversity net gain and land cost and nutrient neutrality and all of those elements as, to boot. But I think that actually the document does do a good job. It reflects the challenges of our most needy residents. It reflects the reality of those who might never have a realistic chance actually of getting their own home, but equally it reflects the current housing provision, the financial challenges that we face as both individuals and as a district. I think those who are looking for box tick, form-led, procedural, weighty document may well be disappointed. But I also think that the ambitious nature of this document will continue, as you say. It's a live working document to evolve over time as the needs of our residents, our communities and our partners also continue to evolve. But focusing on priorities, reflecting realities and directing at ambitions, the new housing strategy certainly gives a blueprint that should enable our most vulnerable residents to thrive, and I absolutely commend it and the work that your team has done. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I wanted to welcome the contents of the strategy, but particularly relating to priority 4, and commend the foresight shown by Councillor Suggett in identifying the need for new ways of dealing with temporary accommodation and the innovative approach towards prevention. Such an approach can be maximised positively due to the fact that the Inspiring Communities programme is embedded into the Council already. The strategy will see the Housing Department and the Communities Department work closer on a regular basis to identify where early intervention is possible, relating to vulnerable residents in the terms of debt advice for such issues as rent arrears, mortgage repayments, and identifying eligibility of benefits which could in some cases negate the need for temporary accommodation. The strategy through prevention will help to relieve homelessness through collaboration with relevant partners internally and externally. And I believe this approach can extend to the Health and Wellbeing Partnership Board, which can identify preventative processes relating to health inequalities to support the housing strategy. I welcome the strategy and hope Cabinet will adopt the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just
I wasn't going to mention it, but I will just refer to what Councillor Atwell and Clark said. As you know, I have been promoting or trying to promote exception sites for many years, and I think we've moved a long way down the road of improving how we in fact go about it. And I was pleased to hear Stephen Cowan say that he was looking at new ways to open out, because exception sites, I believe, for a rural area particularly, are absolutely key. But we also shouldn't forget that we can introduce urban exception sites as well. And I think if we did that, that would do even more to speed up the process of doing what I was actually going to say, and that was how well I think we are continuing the emphasis on the most vulnerable members of our society. If we deal with the most vulnerable members, then I think the others will follow on in a natural way. And you mentioned those 100 or so who are in temporary accommodation, and the many more who are perhaps sofa surfing or whatever the local phrase is at the moment for it. We do need to concentrate on those people, because if we can get those people into homes with their own front door, then I think we are really starting to tackle the problem of housing in this district. So congratulations on the document. I think it's well done. I'm glad you said it's a live document. I've got a few thoughts that I will give you later, which might actually improve it as well. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I've got Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Cowan, then Councillor Webb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I must say, as a member, I welcome this strategy. Since I was elected in 2015, housing has been a big issue for residents contacting me, and especially against what I would call slum landlords. We've had issues with damp and slum landlords and unfit houses being rented by desperate people, and all I had to go to was the environmental department here, where they got involved to sort it. Now there's something positive for us as members to come to, because you've got this strategy. So I think it's absolutely good. Housing has moved on since I've been elected tremendously, especially under Jill there with her team. Since she's been in house, the housing strategy itself has very, very much improved and support, and there is a lot of support there for our residents. And I would say as well, I've got a non-exception site in one of my villages in my ward, and it is going to be completely affordable and social housing. So that is going to be a massive benefit to the housing team. So well done, everybody. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Peter. Councillor Cowan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure I'm not alone amongst our elected members when people talk about housing. The fundamental question that I get asked many times when I go to parish councils is, why do we need more houses? Surely we've got enough houses. Well, the answer is quite clear. We don't have enough houses. And the answer that I give is kind of like on repeat every single time. And I think this document begins to draw together various strands. And I'm really delighted to see it, because this council is adopting a far more holistic approach to policy setting than I think has ever happened in the past. And it shows itself here in this particular document, and we've heard it already today about the link up between planning policy and housing strategy. The two things are actually inseparable, really. And in the past, of course, our housing strategy for affordable sites, for example, has been constrained by central government diktat with this wonderful word called sustainability, which refuses to reflect the fact that half our population in Breckland live in a rural area with no access to bus transport. But that's actually where they live. It's where they've been born, they've been brought up, their family, their network that supports them through life exists. And this document, I think, when we look at the priorities, is really setting the tone for how we need to take our residents and businesses forward in the coming years. For instance, priority 1 talks about available in the right places. And that's absolutely fundamental. In the past, we've only focused on delivering significant housing, perhaps in urban areas, whereas actually that's not where it's needed, because you take priority 3, where we're asking for making better use of existing homes, A lot of those existing homes exist in the rural areas, and they're rather large, and a couple of folk, or maybe only a single person, is rattling around in it, doesn't want to leave that rural community because that's where their support network exists, yet they can't find a smaller property to move into in the locality, which would then release a bigger home for families to move into, for example. So I think this is an extremely valuable document. It's probably the first time we've seen the way that we've linked policies from different parts of the local authority together to really work hard to deliver what is an essential service, and one which, despite the fact that the UK national housing population, I beg your pardon, numbers have only risen by, I think it's just over 500 in the last 12 months, according to the ONS, because of the variations between people who emigrate and people who migrate in. This council in this district has a desperate need for housing, and the population is growing in this district, as we've seen. And therefore, we need to provide the right framework to enable everybody to have the house to which they should be entitled, in the place to which they wish to live, and enable them to work and contribute to the economy. So well done, everybody.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to basically repeat, as well as a bit of my own, per usual, everything that everybody has said. I totally support the new housing strategy. I'd like to thank Councillor Saga and also Jill and the team for a brilliant result. When I was portfolio holder for communities, it became extremely clear that the people who were needing housing support also need community support. And by joining these two teams together, working together more than ever, it can be proactively supported rather than let people get in such a muddle, which is what's happened quite so many, a lot of times, to be perfectly honest. So I hope and I know that this strategy is going to proactively help us to look after our residents in our communities. Well done, everybody. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Councillor Webb. If there are no further comments or questions in relation to this, oh, sorry, Councillor Clausen, apologies.
I want to agree with everything. I think it's a cracking document, cracking piece of work. The only thing that I was hoping would be picked up was the absolute enthusiasm from our officers to make this thing work. And that means members and officers are going to be absolutely on the same page. So thank you for that. Thank you for this brilliant piece of work. And well done, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had the recommendations moved under item 9 for the housing strategy 2024 to 2028. All those, have we had?
No, I didn't say.
Okay, fine, sorry. You've got the recommendations printed there on page 24 of the agenda pack. There are the two recommendations. We'll take them as read. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I'm getting ahead of myself. Super. Thanks to Sarah, Councillor Bowes and Councillor Bambridge and all the housing team and Abby as our new housing strategy manager. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to item 10 then, which is the local plan update. We'll jump straight into that. So members will be aware that on the 30th of July, the new government published a consultation version for the National Plan and Policy Framework, the NPPF. Amongst the other proposals, detailed an increase for our annual housing requirement for the majority of local planning authorities across the country. Breckland's number rose from 661, which was our current draft local plan figure, to an astonishing 917, a 39% uplift. Once agreed by government, any new number would be a mandatory for all local authorities with those new increases, and that need will become the basis of all new local plans. As members will also be aware, the Council is in the progression of its new local plan with consultation on the Regulation 18, which ended in July of this year. And work has been progressing on our draft submission of that plan, which was expected to be in before Cabinet in January 2025. As part of the NPPF consultation, a transition timetable was also proposed, and this was based on the date of the revised local NPPF as published. Unlikely, though, that was going to be sometime later this year, and any affected plan impacting our Regulation 19 process within a month of that publication date. Members are also advised that the Council's published Regulation 19 document within a month of the revised NPPF being published using the current housing figure of 661 per annum would also not have been submitted for the examination until it had been fully assessed under that new housing number, and currently that would have been unconfirmed number for us to work through our revised NPPF. This would, though, this would require us in 18 months to do exactly that, a brand new local plan with a brand new housing number. If we chose to pause, though, as is presented in the Cabinet report today, waiting for the confirmation of that new housing number and the new planning policy framework, and to commence a new Regulation 18 process, this could be concluded by December 2026, a deadline for the plan which would be submitted under the current plan-making regime instead of the new process. Pausing work at this time represents the most suitable and sustainable, cost-effective and non-abortive work and course of action for this council, which would remove a lot of cause for confusion and concern with all of our residents, businesses and our town and parish councils. It will also prevent us spending unnecessary money to require any evidence changes at this point ahead of any changes to the NPPF. If Cabinet does agree today to pause our local plan, officers will work with myself and our working group to understand the emergence of the NPPF and the housing number and what this could look like on our previous call for sites work, and how we could ensure that that uplift on numbers is taking place at the most smooth, in the most smooth way possible. Work will continue across our 3 strategic sites which were presented, and to confirm they were Barker's Farm in Larling, Dereham South West and Robertson Barracks. All of these sites were brought forward in the call for sites and not the council's initiation to identify these sites. We will, however, still progress these as mentioned to ensure that that large housing number of some 2,000 units across each one of those could be delivered, to ensure that our local plan in its current numbers is sound, whilst ensuring that extra increase from 661 to 917 doesn't place an even greater burden on all of our communities. I think it's fair to say, members, that I'm disappointed and frustrated at this current change to our housing number, in which our Hedner report identified our local housing need, and this large number to 917 will cause a great impact to many residents and businesses across our district in how we deliver these homes. And I ask members to support the Cabinet's recommendation to agree to pause the local plan update until the publication of the revised local planning policy framework, and that a local new development scheme setting out a revised timetable will be brought to Cabinet for agreement following the publication of the new NPPF and housing number. And I'm happy to take any questions. Hewitt and then Councillor Atwell, please.
Question, observation, Sam, notwithstanding the scale of the daft proposed uplift in the district and the blunt, if not rather crude diktat requiring us to impose this number, or it will be imposed on us, and the ridiculously short time frame that the two things seem to be considered to be imposed, I have to agree with you. You have to support the recommendation because there is no plan B, but I absolutely share your frustration, if not your outright anger, in terms of how this has just been imposed, which will adversely affect, I think, every single person living within the district. But now we wait.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Sam. Just wanted to clarify, when we get to November, the existing local plan, adopted local plan, reaches its 5-year anniversary, and looking in the document that you put forward here, I'm just wondering if somebody can confirm what weight our existing local plan policies will have after November in the determination of planning applications. Regardless of what's gone on with government and the housing numbers, we were always going to reach this point in November before the new local plan would be adopted sometime later. So can we have some clarity on that? Because I think residents, I'm sure, people in construction, developers, etc., everybody wants to know what the challenges are around that. So could you clarify that, please?
I'm going to look to Mr. Darcy for the technical response. However, you'll know that if we were progressing with the existing NPPF and our housing number, our emerging policies for the Reg 19 would have gained weight when we're determining those plan applications. However, with a brand new NPPF which is out for consultation, could look vastly different to what it does today, and you'll see the council's its formal submission to government later on this week to confirm our position. But Mr. Darcy, is there anything particularly you want to add from a technical perspective which I may have got wrong?
No, you've got nothing wrong, Chair. Thank you. You're right. The end of November, the local plan will be 5 years old, reached its 5th birthday, so to speak.
At that time, the weight that we can then attach to the policies we will depend on their consistency with the MPPF in place at the time. It's what's known as the tilted balance. There is a presumption in favour of development, but the council is able to look at each policy and form a case on a policy by policy basis. So it doesn't mean that they are completely gone at all. It's the weight that can be attached to each of them, but the presumption is in favour of development, and also whether or not you've got a 5-year housing land supply, which we will again be due to publish at the end of November when the local plan is 5 years old under the current MPPF arrangements.
Have you got a follow-up question to that, Councillor Aswell?
No, I just think we're going to need some clarity as a member of the planning committee myself. I think when we get to that anniversary, I would urge a meeting of a closed session of the planning committee in its entirety, probably with planning policy officers, etc., so we can better understand what it is that we can and can't do in terms of determining applications. I said the MPPF, what's going on with that will happen, but I'm just very conscious that there could be applications at the moment that are in abeyance, yet to be determined. Will we be looking to try and get those determined prior to that anniversary date, get as many of those determined as possible? All these things need to be taken into account before we reach that sort of cliff edge. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm paraphrasing some of your commentary, and apologies. We've got a really clear process we have to go through for any plan application which comes in. The officers will work through those as they do in the timely manner. Just because there is a cliff edge, as you refer to it, for the our local plan getting to its 5-year point, this is a well-trodden path, whether it's from the LDF or the local plan process, which Simon Wood and Rebecca and Mr Darcy are cognizant of. So all of our officers within the council, within the planning team, are aware of those emerging planning policies within our new local plan. However, I think Mr Darcy's point is well made and cannot be missed, that if we were to continue with our current process and move to the Reg 19, and there was substantial changes to the national planning policy framework, we would be out of kilter with that. And regardless of our need, because we've got such a high change, a 39% uplift in our housing requirements, which pushes the 200 threshold, we would have to undertake an immediate review of our local plan. So I wouldn't want anybody to be listening to this thinking that the council is making a decision to pour this lightly. We're absolutely not. We're doing this because we had an unexpected large change in our housing numbers and planning policy, which we weren't expecting with any new government coming in this side of Christmas. So our position for where we are is the planning committee would always be updated on emerging planning policies through the local plan process. It's a standing item on your committee's agenda. And I know that the chairman of the committee, Nigel Wilkin, has been working with Simon and Andrew to make sure that the right juncture in time, a full update is undertaken for those members to understand the emergence of those planning policies. But more importantly, all of our town and parish councils have got such an important role to play through this process as well. I've got Councillor Banbridge, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You've just said it better than I could. Can I say from the backbenchers on your proposal of pause, it is really the only option we have open to us.
Lovely, thanks, Gordon. I've got Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Clausen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, hearing what you're saying, and we do have the regular updates with the local plan, and obviously I would agree to, it's not my decision, but I would agree with to suspend this, at least just to halt the funding going out. As a Vice Chairman of Planning, we are kept up to date, and the officers will have to do the work as normal for applications, and they will be delivered to the committee for determination in the same manner as we always would. I don't think we will, as a committee, we won't be influenced by, oh, we've got this application because the numbers have gone up. It will still be presented to us by the officers so we can determine it as we do now.
Lovely, thanks, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Clausen, please.
Oh, yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, this really does feel that it's been well thought through by this Labour government, doesn't it? I totally agree with everything that everyone has been saying. To go from 661 to 917 is absolutely farcical. It hasn't been thought through. It cannot be thought through because there is no way in this world that you can look at what we've got with all of the problems that we have where we can't build anything from stone curlews through nutrient neutrality, through the battleground, and it goes on and on and on. And then I share every bit of frustration here, Chairman. I haven't got a clue what we can do to influence or modify the thinking. The only thing that, sitting through your presentations with Max, was the sharp intake of breath when you announced to everybody that when this comes in, probably December, January, that we will go from having a 5-year housing land supply to losing it overnight. And if this is true for the rest of the country, this Labour government has now deemed every local plan worthless. Absolutely worthless. So my challenge to you, Chairman, is why should we bother spending £1 million on a local plan if it's going to be made worthless by this government? It seems pointless. Anyway, I support totally pausing it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Clausen. Your sentiments are well made and heard, and I know that the meetings you attend and others, there was similar frustration and concern by those town and parish councillors who are present. I think that Breckland is one of the very fortunate communities across the district, across the country, which has an adopted local plan, always keeps its local plan up to date, and I know that there were people previously who were concerned around our position to undertake a partial review rather than a full local plan undertaken. We were right in that regard to through that process. We will continue as a local council to keep our local plan up to date because it's right and proper. It gives certainty to our community. More importantly, it allows us to work with our statutory consultees and our town and parish councils to create that vision of place to where we, as the community of Breckland, want our homes to go, where we want that open space to go, where we want that employment site to go, where that infrastructure need is across the district. But I am immensely concerned and frustrated for the district of what this new increase of some 39% is going to mean. How we're going to deliver that at pace with our communities will be immensely challenging. We went out through the Reg 18 with a previous number. We've now got to go back and explain to them that our number, our assumption, our assessment was sound, but we now have an artificial number made by the centre and we have to deliver it, and I'm afraid there is no wiggle room. On the back of that, pending Cabinet's decision today, I will write to all town and parish councils this evening, updating them on the decision of this Cabinet, and through the process of the local plan review, as soon as we're in a position to update on a timetable, I'll be sharing that with colleagues across the district as well. Councillor Attewell, please.
Yeah, hear all that and agree with it. Can you tell us when you send in your response to the MPPF, will you be sending a copy of that to all councillors, please?
Yes, so on my roadshow, which myself and the Chief Executive have attended, we've made a commitment to share our response. We're hoping to have that out at some point today, but the Chief Exec minded me, don't make promises I can't keep. So it will be sometime this week to all town and parish councillors and all district councillors for them to be have sight of. Good, if there are no further questions, if the recommendations have been moved, all those in favour? Lovely, thank you very much, that's unanimous. We'll move on to item 11, which is the Carbon Audit Report 23-24, as mentioned in the absence of Councillor Crane. Councillor Sarah Suggett will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair. In 2019, Breckland Council was one of the first authorities in Norfolk to declare a climate emergency, committing to reduce the level of greenhouse gases within the organisation, striving to achieve net zero by 2035 and to lead and educate across the district. In the 2019-20, the Council approved to carry out a baselining exercise to understand its major emission sources. Since then, data has continued to be collected and shared each financial year to monitor and track progress. I'm therefore pleased to share with you today the Council's carbon emission for last year, 2023-24. There is a positive direction of travel with reductions in both of our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which are both in our direct control, with reductions in tonnes of CO2 emissions since the previous year, thanks to the work in Councillor Hewitt's property portfolio with reducing, for example, the amount of gas used in our building and the LED streetlight replacement scheme. Scope 3 emissions, which are those outside of our control, continues to be more of a challenge, and we continue to use our statutory powers to influence, educate and try and change behaviours of those within our supply chain to reduce their emissions further. There have been lots of positive work undertaken in the last year relating to our priorities, and there's a reminder of that work in the appendix and also our plans for the coming months. I would like to recommend to Cabinet this morning that Cabinet acknowledges the content of this report, and I'm happy to take and answer any questions along with Claire Burton. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Any questions or comments in relation to the carbon audit report? No, fine, good. So Cabinet are asked to acknowledge the contents report. All those in favour to acknowledge? Thank you very much. Super. On to the next item then, which is item 12, the Q1 Finance Performance and Projects Report. And this is a joint report in the name of Councillor Webb, Councillor Hewitt and Councillor Clausen. Who's going to present, please? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to present to the committee today the Q1 Finance Performance and Project Report. A summary for each area will be given, and I'm first on the list, so I will start. This report looks at performance for Q1, April to June 2024. We are seeing pleasing data in Q1. The majority of our key performance indicators are at or near target. The Council continues to perform well in many metrics and, importantly, can report on further indicators in relation to housing. This is a result of the housing team, amongst others, completing work on their systems to allow for this additional reporting to be brought forward. Areas in this quarter where performance has been challenging include standards and member conduct complaints dealt with within timescale. The Council has previously performed strongly in this indicator, but has now seen 2 quarters under target. Upon investigation, the reason for this has been a rise in non-Breckland Council complaints that we are obliged to investigate. These are relating specifically to parish councils rather than Breckland members. We have seen a slightly higher than normal level of complaints in this period. Whilst we expect this to be only short-lived, short-term drop in performance, work is underway to look at ways we could improve the standards process internally to allow it to function more effectively and efficiently for democratic services staff. The second area I wanted to speak to you today about is in relation to the annual carbon indicators. Whilst members will note the successes we have had in Scope 1 and Scope 2 areas of which we are in control, members will note an overall increase in the Council's carbon footprint driven by emissions covered under Scope 3, which is indirect emissions, which are out of our control. The other areas that have been flagged within the report are housing benefit changes, website accessibility and subject access request responses. These are areas that we have either previously covered in these sessions or are detailed within the covering report. This report contains 1 revised indicator for communities and a new indicator for contracts and procurement. When we undertook the review of indicators last year, it was always with a view that we make fewer changes year on year and end up with a stable set of KPIs. This is really important as keeping a solid set of KPIs across multiple years enhances our understanding and ability to make data-led decisions and proposals. Finally, some indicator targets have also changed this quarter. This was as part of an annual exercise that the team has undertaken with services aimed at both adding targets to indicators which previously had not had them, and ensuring that targets remain sufficiently stretching, achievable and fit for purpose. I'd like to pass over to Councillor Hewitt now for projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Colleagues, the number of high priority projects being overseen by the Corporate Project Service has now increased to 18 out of the 40 live projects currently on our projects list. Over the last quarter, a number of these have been completed, including the installation of solar panels at Dereham Leisure Centre, which will not only improve the efficiency, the energy efficiency of this key strategic asset, but will also reduce carbon emissions, as identified by the previous item, by at least 47 tonnes per year. The transfer of all planning and building control staff to Breckland via the TUPE agreement has also now been completed, and I'm sure you will join me in welcoming those staff members to the Council. This project should result in a financial saving to the Council of over £220,000 a year. And the crucial work of the team will also be supported by the implementation of new planning software, which is on track to be delivered by the end of this year. And finally, work has also begun on several new projects, including Healthy Homes. This initiative, which is funded by central government, will see improvements being made to properties in the private rental sector to help tackle issues of damp and mould. And again, I refer you back to the housing strategy earlier on, where we are continually seeing our team work across function and across the area within the district. More importantly, though, in terms of Healthy Homes, the Healthy Homes project will be delivered through engagement with landlords and tenants whilst visiting properties to directly treat and prevent health issues and other issues relating to the accommodation. I will now pass over to Councillor Cowan. Sam.
Thank you very much. Finance. In the past, members will no doubt recall that when we get to Q1, I've been able to report that whilst we're looking at a deficit towards the end of the year, that deficit has been relatively small, maybe £200,000–300,000 or so. This time, as you will see from the Appendix A, we are projecting a deficit of £826,000 this particular Q1. This is a significant sum of money, and one which we've not seen, if at all, in this council. And regrettably, it's again a bit like a broken record. The reason we're facing such a deficit is not because of anything we as a council have done or not done, but these are factors completely outside of our control that are leading us to this particular position that we find ourselves in. So if we look at the real figures that are shown in the appendix, planning and building control is showing a loss of £540,000. That doesn't mean we've got too many staff sitting on seats in planning and building control. It means that the number of significant planning applications has fallen off considerably this year. And we've heard in this arena today and in the past why that might be. And we've got nutrient neutrality and biodiversity gain issues that developers are trying to struggle with. So that's the first significant hurdle we have to overcome. The second one is item 5 there, which is contracts and operations. Now, we just heard from Paul on my left here that we now have in-house our planning and building control service. That was one of the 3 contracts that we had running. The other 2, of course, are Serco with our waste and the PFI contract. Regrettably, we're seeing a significant additional cost attributed to this council by decisions taken by others, which has resulted in a £468,000 potential overspend through our waste contract. Again, a not insignificant sum. And all I can say is thank goodness that interest rates have held up, which has shown that we've been able to generate an additional £433,000 in income through interest payments. You know, that indicates the scale of the problem that we are facing. £826,000. Now, we do have a plan, as I hope you appreciate. We do have a plan to bring that down. But some of that plan relies on others paying us back some of the cash which we're having to find ourselves to deal with things like waste. And those discussions have not yet been finalised. But we do anticipate that by the time we get to the end of Q4, we will have brought that figure down to a manageable number at the end of the day. It's not the sort of report I like to present to colleagues, this, but it does illustrate the pressures that this council is facing in the year ahead. And we do have to find ways of either raising additional income or making cuts to our services. And that latter point is something that this council is reluctant to do at any cost. You've heard already through some of our initiatives how supporting the vulnerable in society is so important to us. You'll have seen from some of the documentation before you today that the average salary in Breckland is significantly lower than the national average. And that puts our residents into quite a difficult position, as you might imagine. And as a consequence, we want to do as much as we possibly can to ensure that our residents actually have a lifestyle which is going to keep them safe, keep them warm, and provide them with housing. Those are our tenets, really, for this council. And so, as I said earlier, we have a plan, but our plan is to ensure that we perform very efficiently and effectively. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Cowan, Councillor Hewitt and Councillor Webb. Happy to take any questions on those three areas of the report. I've got Councillor Hewitt, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me today, Councillor Clark and then Councillor Attwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Any resemblance between myself and Councillor Hewitt is purely coincidental, I'm sure, and the fact we have glasses. Two things. One, looking at the finance report, and thanks to Councillor Cowan for that. Looking at the project highlights summary, I'm particularly interested in the healthy homes aspect, particularly around mould, because we've had presentations from a number of private housing providers at scrutiny in how they deal with mould themselves and their work internally reporting to their boards, and some of the providers are better than others. I know that's at early stages, but I think that's going to obviously link in there with the housing strategy and other stuff. So going forward, we'd welcome further details and progress on that. The other one, which is a question probably which will go to possibly Councillor Hewitt as well as Councillor Cowan, is around car park strategy. In the column there, which says £700,000 additional funds required preparation for consultation stage. And my question is, does that figure include the funds which were approved by council on the 5th of September to be released, or is that in addition? I realise, of course, that all those figures will have been included in pro forma B, which the Cabinet approved on the 15th of July. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I'll come to Councillor Suggett shortly just for the car park piece, but I don't know if Mr Snowden, you just want to update on the Healthy Homes project, please?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for your question. It's a project that the team are really looking forward to delivering, and there's lots of challenges in the private rental sector around damp and mould. And as part of that project, there'll be a detailed comms plan, so there'll be regular updates to members and to the community as well with regards to the progress on that particular project. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hewitt for car parks, please.
In short, the broad answer is yes, it has been. I do, though, want to raise something just for the avoidance of any doubt for anyone who might want to connect 2 and 2 and come up with 700,000. These are budgeted numbers that can be taken out of our overall budget, to which Phil was referring to, and ring-fenced within the management of our car parking operations specifically in order to protect our general budgeted numbers. I'm aware that a number of people have looked at some of the numbers, particularly around car parking, and have suggested that they might provide an additional burden on our general council budget, and the answer is no. We are specifically looking to ring fence the cost of car parking provision, £450,000 a year, by making an investment that in turn can protect that car park provision moving forwards and take some of the pressure, both capital and revenue pressure, off our general budget numbers around that.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Clark? No? Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for that report, Councillor Cowan. I note that you said that there's a lot of things that are outside of our control and problems caused by others. Could you elaborate on who these others are and why they're causing us these problems? I also note from the report that we've got things like our wages in Breckland and our education metrics are below the national average. I just wonder if you could tell me what's been done by government and this council to address this in recent years. Thank you.
Oh, interesting questions, thank you. So the first one, planning and building control. Well, no, let's take the first one, which is health and housing, because that's £115,000 overspent. I think you've probably heard today a lot of the reasoning behind that. We have an exceptional demand on our services for health and housing. And as a consequence, we're showing an overspend. And that's part and parcel of why the new housing strategy is being developed in the way it is, in conjunction with planning policy. I know that not just this council, but other district councils are lobbying central government to make the changes that are necessary to recover the actual cost that councils face for temporary housing and homelessness. And it's why we as a council have taken the initiative, as you know, of developing our own properties throughout the district in various locations in order to reduce the burden on council tax ratepayers effectively by providing facilities for those who are in desperate need, which gives us a return on that investment and in turn takes pressure off the housing. But the housing budget, as you can see, is already £115,000 overspent this year at Q1. The second significant item, planning and building control, I think I covered that earlier. It's because, frankly, we're not getting the significant number of planning applications in that a planning authority like ours would normally expect to see. As you know, our housing targets were 661 per annum, and we've been struggling to achieve those as a result of the additional costs that have been faced by the industry, and not only the additional costs, but the shortage of labour and resource, and then all the challenges that have come as a consequence of nutrient neutrality and the like. It is what it is. It shows us a significant overspend on our planning and building control because our income levels are down. The contracts and operations I referred to in particular was waste. And you will be aware that the County Council effectively closed Shipton transfer station. And that happened without consultation with us as a council. It was a de facto agreement. And as a consequence, the arrangements we have in place or had in place with Serco were significantly affected. The result of that is that there's been a significant cost increase because the service round that Serco have to carry out has changed dramatically. And that is essentially shown as a line item of an additional £468,000 on our budget. You know, when we budgeted last year, we didn't anticipate that happening at all. It just a stroke of a pen, and we're faced with that burden. As I said earlier as well, thank goodness that we do have significant investments. We do have the capital to invest. And as you'll see from the investment profile, a significant amount of that investment is actually with other local authorities who are desperately short of cash. So we're able to lend to them, which has helped to prop up our own finances. Otherwise, that figure would be, as you will appreciate, well over £1 million. So those are the reasons, Roger, why our budget is showing where the overspends are at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll just look to Councillor Clausen and Mr Holdsworth just to give an update on what this council is doing directly to support growth in economy across the district and some of our exciting work around the skills, the boost, and Thetford Modern Manufacturing as well, just to give, I know it's not a direct target within the KPIs, but just as it was a question raised at Cabinet, I'm content to take it.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Councillor Aspel. It's quite a big question, so I'll just give you a few kind of crazy highlights of what the council is trying to do to address that lower wage level and lower job density. So a key part of what we're trying to do is to bring forward bigger sites to house employers who can kind of nudge the dial in terms of wages and investment. You'll be aware we've invested a lot of time in supporting Snetterton as a primary growth location, including some key policy choices by this council and the investment of support for a new substation there. Members may be aware of the news in the last week that a large imminent investment's been confirmed there through Ansible Motion, who are bringing forward a new site as part of Snetterton, which will be a real positive and what we hope will be the first of many similar kind of positive growth in the wage position. It's not just about Snetterton, we've got similar initiatives focused around all of our large market towns and as part of the future Breckland plans, effectively aspirations to bring forward growth and employment around all of our market towns and villages. The other element there is on skills, and members will be aware we recently adopted a new skills plan, key to which was investment in some very targeted areas of support. So we're currently in partnership with Norfolk County Council running a Breckland-based boost programme to particularly support those who are more vulnerable and finding it harder to access the labour market. That's to date supported, I think, up to around 50 individuals, and we'll be continuing to pick up pace. That's kind of one end of the spectrum. We're also working at the other with education providers to bring forward new facilities and training. But I will pause there.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Clausen.
The only thing I'd like to add, Chairman, is that it's a space that traditionally isn't a space occupied by a district council. Just like your inspiring communities is a space not traditionally occupied by a district council. However, what we are brilliant at is enabling and influencing, and that's really what we are doing. And we are just starting to see the results of that. With any luck, we'll be able to report back within a month, I would say, and give some very, very positive numbers on what's happening today on the skills agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I saw the excitement on the Chairman of the Overall Scrutiny Commission that you'd be able to come and update them on our progress. Councillor Atwell, did you have a follow-up at all?
Yeah, I just wanted to also say, and thank you for the explanation, Phil. I think it's good to understand what the challenges are. My views on nutrient neutrality are well documented. I think that's a complete disaster. That's costing us money. It should have been brought in over a longer period so everybody could have got up, ready for it. And it's had a very negative effect, not just on this council's finances, but also local SME builders. But I think also we need to recognise the fact that since 2010, according to the documents you've kindly provided us today, the central government grant has been cut by 40%. We're still not at levels we were back in 2010, from what I'm reading from these documents here. And that's not an insignificant amount of money. We've also got challenges around business rates, haven't we? I don't know what the answer is to that, but I would say, we haven't, don't want to be overtly political, but we haven't been helped by central government to date for quite some time. There's been a lot of challenges for local government. You've just got to hope that with the new government, they take that on board and we may get some positive changes, but who knows?
Thank you very much. Any other comments in relation to this? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I support what Andrew just said, and it is needed and has been for quite a while, because the government did identify Breckland a few years ago as the largest district in Norfolk where residents migrate to work, and we do need those workers to stay in Breckland and earn that higher wage, because obviously that's going to affect I would imagine that's why it's a low wage in Breckland, because people are migrating away to work in other districts. So it's good work Andrew's doing and the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Any other questions or comments in relation to this? Councillor Cowan.
I just wish to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Atwell made. He's quite right. The rate support grant, as it used to be known, is significantly reduced across the country, not just for this council. But it's thankfully as a result of the way this council has carried out its business over those last 14 years that we've been able to weather that storm quite well, to be frank. And with the new government, we don't know just quite how they're going to react and respond on October the 30th when they announce their new budget. And we wait with bated breath to see what's going to happen there. You're quite right to talk about business rates as well. We've been very successful in getting inward investment, and you will have seen from some of the previous financial reports that we've made that our significant income comes from business rate take. It really does. But unfortunately, we suspect that in the fullness of time, that will become a bit like a sword of Damocles for us, because government will look at it and say, oh, well, we need to reset that because clearly you're taking too much out of local economy, and we'll claw some of it back. Thankfully, we don't believe that's going to happen until probably 26, 27, but it's likely to happen then. And there are other unknowns as well that we are concerned about. You know, as you will know, in terms of business rate retention for energy efficient green schemes, we retain 100%. We're not sure exactly what new government's position is going to be when it comes to allowing district councils to retain that business rate, particularly given the scale at which they're proposing to allow energy efficient green schemes to be constructed across the country. So we are nervous, I'll be honest. We don't know what's likely to happen. And as a consequence of that, we are being very prudent in recording and reporting what we're doing at the moment, because we need to be quite fleet of foot, if I'm honest, in order to be able to respond quickly to those. Just as another point, I was interested to read in the press not so long ago, I think it was last week, that there's great renewed interest or significant interest in adopting a railhead at Snetterton. There already is a railhead there which feeds one of the industrial units, but it would seem that at long last someone's recognised that there's a potential for much more inward investment into that part of the world, and thankfully it sits exactly where we want it to be, which is at the heart of our employment area. So one would anticipate in the fullness of time that maybe we'll see significant growth opportunities beyond those which we are trying to drive directly as a council. But of course, a lot of that will depend on whether or not the Ely Junction improvement works goes ahead. And I'm afraid that's not down to us. It's again one of those factors outside of our control. It's central government who will decide whether or not they're going to find the funding to do just that. And certainly from listening to the new Chancellor, I suspect that's a bit of a pig flying in the sky idea at the moment, because they've actually cut back, as we know, on hospital rebuilding programmes, they've cut back on transport and infrastructure programmes, and I suspect the Ely Junction, which is absolutely crucial to the East of England's economy, may well suffer the same fate. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. If there are no further comments or questions in relation to the Q1 Finance Performance and Projects Report, Cabinet are asked to note this before it goes on its next journey to the Over and Scrutiny Commission on the 24th of October. So duly noted. Thank you. We'll move on to item 13, which is the Anglia Revenues and Benefits Partnership minutes from the joint committee meeting held on the 3rd of September. This is just for noting, but does anybody have any questions in relation to these? No, there are none. Thank you. So item 14, date of the next meeting. The date of the next meeting will be held on the 11th of November 2024 at 9:30 here in the Anglia Room at Elizabeth House. I'll now